The first time I caught my little brother talking to the sink, I didn't think demon. I thought he was messing with me, or praying, or doing that kid thing where they turn a stupid habit into a secret because it makes them feel powerful. Then he lifted his head out of the basin like he'd been holding his breath underwater, looked straight at where I was standing in the dark, and smiled like he'd been waiting for me to show up. We weren't the kind of family that did normal anyway, so my brain tried to fit it into the usual shapes. Stress, cabin fever, too much scripture, too little sun, my father's voice in my skull telling me there's always a reason, and the reason is usually sin. That's the thing people never get right when they talk about us after the fact. They act like we were feral in the woods, like we spawned in the bunker, fully insane. We were clean, we were organized, we were prepared, and we were terrified of the outside world long before we ever had a reason to be terrified of the inside. My father wasn't some toothless guy screaming on a street corner. He could talk, that man. He had the kind of voice that made you stand up straighter without realizing it. Calm, measured, confident. The kind of confident that doesn't ask permission. He used to run a small congregation in a corn-and-soy town nobody visits on purpose. There was a modest church with a big white cross that looked like it could spear the sky if you moved it a few inches. My father preached end times like other men preached retirement plans. With charts, with dates circled in red, with the same satisfied look you see on someone who's sure he cracked the code. In our house, we grew up waiting for the end of the world the way other kids wait for Christmas. Any day now, any hour, the trumpet, the fire, the sorting. He didn't call himself father like some Catholic thing. He was just dad, but he wanted us to treat him like a leader, and leaders get titles even if you don't say them out loud. The way he looked at you made you feel like you were being weighed. There were 5 of us kids at first. Me, my older sister Lacey, my older brother Grant, my younger brother Micah, and the baby Owen. Owen was the one with the sticky hands and the loud laugh. The kid who'd cry if he stepped on an ant, then turn around and throw a rock at a bird because he wanted to see if he could hit it. He was contradictions in sneakers. Mom left the faith when Owen was still in diapers. That's the phrase my father used, like she'd walked away from a club membership. It was all he ever said. No pictures left out. No stories. Just absence like a bruise you stop touching because it hurts too much. One week we were in a rental on a paved road with neighbors who waved. The next, we were in a house that didn't show up cleanly on most GPS apps, tucked back behind trees and a long gravel drive. It wasn't a cabin. It was a real house. 2 stories. Basement. A porch that wrapped around like arms. But you couldn't see it from the road unless you knew exactly where to look because the property was huge and the tree line ate sound. Even the wind out there felt muffled. My father told us, flat out, we were never to tell anyone where we lived. Not friends, not teachers, not church people. Nobody. If anyone asked, we were staying with family. If someone pressed, we were between places. If someone got too curious, we were moving again soon. He said secrecy kept us safe in a fallen world. I told myself a different story when I couldn't sleep. I imagined my mother out there, hair blowing in the wind like a movie, driving back roads and peeling off flyers from bulletin boards, hiring private investigators, saying our names into phones that didn't answer. I imagined her finding our driveway and laying on the horn and us sprinting out like animals released from a cage. Then I'd feel sick for thinking it and whisper apologies into my pillow because guilt was as routine as brushing your teeth in our house. The year everything snapped into place was 2020. You don't need me to recap it. You lived it. The news got loud. People got mean. Shelves got empty. The air felt poisoned even when you were inside. My father walked around with this calm in his face that I hated, like the world was finally confirming him. He quit his job. The first week our state started talking about restrictions. Construction manager. Good money. Benefits. He dropped it like it was dirty. Then he started working the back of the property every day. He made calls, had men come out in trucks, kept everyone away from the woods behind the far field. There were metal deliveries. Concrete. a generator that came on a flatbed under a tarp. He stood there with his arms folded while the driver asked where he wanted it, and my father just pointed like a king. Whenever we asked what he was building, he smiled that tight little smile and said, "All will be revealed in God's good time." I was 15, old enough to have questions, old enough to notice that God's good time was usually code for because I said so. Prices were climbing. People were getting laid off. And here was my father spending money like the end was a sale. Then one night, it started raining hard enough to make the trees hiss. He woke us all up, called us down to the kitchen, and turned on a little radio he kept in a drawer like it was a gun. The announcer's voice was tense and excited. Lockdown. Statewide. Stay home. Don't travel. Do not gather. The word pandemic got said like it was a curse. My father listened without blinking. When the broadcast ended, he turned to us and said, "Pack your bags. Take what matters. We might not be coming back." Nobody asked coming back from where, because you didn't ask questions like that in our house unless you wanted to be reminded what a belt felt like. We each had a backpack by the stairs because he made us. Mine already had a change of clothes, a Bible, a small flashlight, a pocket knife I wasn't supposed to have, and 2 paperback books I'd hidden inside a hollowed-out hymn book cover. Lacey had snacks and a notebook. Grant had tools. Micah stuffed his bag with a basketball and a pair of old headphones, even though there was no phone service out there worth a damn. Owen brought a stuffed dog he'd chewed the ear off of. We walked out into the rain in a line, flashlights cutting pale cones through the wet darkness. No estretlits, no neighbors, just fields and trees and the sound of water hitting leaves like applause. The further we went, the more wrong it felt. There were tire tracks and churn mud. There were piles of dirt like graves. There were boards stacked under tarps. But there was no building, no shith, no barn, nothing. My father kept walking like he knew exactly where the ground would open. At the edge of the far field, he stopped, crouched, and swept away wet grass with his hand. Something metallic caught my flashlight beam. A hatch, a man-sized metal hatch hidden in the ground like it was ashamed to be seen. My father pulled a thick key from around his neck. It hung on a lanyard with his cross, the key heavier, uglier. He slid into the lock and turned it with a click that sounded too loud in all that open land. He looked at us and said, "We'll be safe here until the fire comes." I remember thinking, if you have to say you'll be safe, you're trying to convince yourself. He opened the hatch. A breath of cold air lifted up like something exhaling. A ladder dropped into darkness. One by one, we went down, our hands slick on the rungs. I expected dirt, bugs, a smell like rot. Instead, I smelled paint. New paint, sharp and clean, like a fresh room, not a tomb. When my father came down last, he pulled the hatch shut above us with a solid metal groan, and for a second there was nothing. The sound of rain cut off like a door closing on a loud party. Then he flicked a switch. Light snapped on. Bright solar-powered strips lined hallways that branched off like veins. The walls were painted a pale color that tried too hard to feel friendly. There were shelves stacked with canned food in neat rows. There were water tanks and a little pump station humming soft. There was a shower room, a main room with cots and blankets, a table bolted to the floor. It wasn't a dungeon. Not first. My father stood in the center like he'd been waiting his whole life to show us this. Then he reached into a folder on the table and pulled out a laminated sheet, already smudged at the edges like it had been handled too much. He slapped it down flat and put his palm on it like a judge. "These are the procedures," he said. "You follow them. You live." He didn't call them rules. He called them operational notes, like we were soldiers, and this was a mission instead of a hole in the ground. The sheet had 5 bullet points in thick black marker, and above it someone had taped a crooked yellow post-it that said, in my father's handwriting, "Don't get creative." I stared at that post-it longer than I should have, because something about it made my skin crawl. Like it wasn't a joke. Like it wasn't meant for kids. The laminated sheet read, "Rule 1. The hatch stays sealed unless I say otherwise. If you touch the lock, you lose a hand before you lose your soul. Rule 2. Radio time is 1 hour a day, no more. If the broadcast turns to static, you turn it off immediately and you do not listen for messages. Rule 3. Do not speak into drains, pipes, vents, or with a well access. Not as a joke, not as a prayer. Water has ears down here. Rule 4. If the lights go out in a hallway, you don't go down that hallway until I've checked it. You do not feel your way. Darkness makes mistakes on purpose. Rule 5. Boil water 20 minutes before drinking, even if it looks clear, especially if it looks clear. 2 of them sounded like my father being dramatic. The hand thing, the darkness makes mistakes thing. One of them sounded like a boring safety lecture. One of them sounded insane. Do not speak into drains. Micah snorted when he read that, like he couldn't help it. My father's head turned slow and sharp. You think that's funny? Dad asked. Micah swallowed his laugh like it was poison. No, sir. Owen leaned closer to the sheet, his hair wet and plastered to his forehead. How can water have ears? He asked. My father's expression softened in that performative way he did when he wanted to look like a gentle shepherd instead of a man with a bunker key. He touched Owen's shoulder. You don't need to understand it, he said. You just need to obey. That was our family motto in a sentence. That first week underground almost felt like a strange vacation. Owen and Micah bounced off the walls, literally. They jumped on their cots until my father snapped at them. Lacey wandered around, touching everything like she was afraid it would disappear. Grant inspected the shelves and the pump station like he was trying to find flaws. I found the small bookshelf my father had installed in the main room and felt this weird tug in my chest because it meant he remembered what I loved. Or he remembered what kept me quiet. There was even a piano, a full upright shoved against one wall, wrapped in plastic like a body. Lacey's face did this thing when she saw it, like she was about to cry, but in a way she'd deny if you asked. My father had thought of all of us. That's what it felt like then. He told us he'd almost ruined himself building it, but money didn't matter now. The world above was collapsing. Currency was about to become toilet paper. The only thing that mattered was faith and readiness. There was a radio on a shelf with a hand crank backup and a small antenna strung along the ceiling like a nervous vein. My father told us the station we could pick up was the one God allowed. He made it sound holy. Every day we had chores. Every day we had scripture. Every day we had the same meals, canned vegetables, canned meat, instant rice. My father kept a notebook with our food inventory and a calendar where he'd written out the number of days we could survive like it was a countdown to salvation. He even had a number, a specific number, which should have been my first clue something was wrong with him long before anything else went wrong with the bunker. 1,260 days, he said like it was poetry. That's the length of the tribulation. We ride it out, then we rise. At night, we'd sit in the main room. Lacey played hymns on the piano. Grant sometimes joined her singing in this low, steady voice that made the whole place feel less like a hole and more like a home. Owen fell asleep with his head in my lap, drooling, warm, and alive. I'd listen to their voices echo down the painted halls and think, maybe Dad's right. Maybe the world above really is a disease. Maybe this is the only clean place left. It felt safe in the way a closed fist feels safe. Tight, controlled, no gaps for surprises. Then, around the 3rd month, Owen started asking about the pipes. It came up at dinner first, like it was casual. We were eating canned green beans and powdered mashed potatoes reconstituted with boiled water. Owen swung his legs under the table, bored, and said, "Where does the poop go?" My father hated that word, but Owen said things blunt. He was 7 and still had the courage of not being embarrassed by his own body. Dad's jaw tightened. "We call it waste," he said, "and it goes away." Owen frowned like away wasn't a real answer. "Where?" Grant started explaining, because Grant was always trying to make peace between my father and reality. "There's a septic tank system tied into a discharge line," he said, "and the well pulls from a different line. They don't touch." Owen didn't look satisfied. His eyes moved to the wall, to the place where a pipe disappeared into painted concrete. "Do they go up?" he asked. Dad's face hardened. No. Owen's voice got quieter. Do they go farther down? I remember the hairs on my arms rising. Not because of anything he said, but because of the way he said it. Like he already knew the answer, and he was testing to see if we did too. Dad leaned forward. Why are you asking about this? He said. Owen shrugged fast, too fast. Just wondering. Micah laughed. He's scared something's going to come up the toilet. Owen didn't laugh. He stared at Micah like Micah had just said something he shouldn't have said out loud. That night, I woke up needing to pee and heard something I hadn't heard before. Whispering. At first, I thought it was Lacey praying because she did that sometimes when she couldn't sleep, mutter prayers under her breath like she was chewing them. But this was different. Lower. A boy's voice. Owen's voice, I realized, and it wasn't prayer. It was conversation. Our bunker didn't have doors. My father hated doors. He said doors were for secrets. So sound traveled. You heard everything. Every cough, every footstep, every sigh. It was impossible to hide. And yet that whispering felt like it was meant to be hidden anyway. I lay still, heart thumping, and listened. Owen whispered something, then paused, like he was waiting for a response. Then I heard it. Not words I understood. Not even words at all. Really. A low, smooth voice sliding through the pipes like oil. It didn't sound like a person standing in a room. It sounded like something being transmitted through metal. Warped a little. Distant and intimate at the same time, like someone breathing right next to your ear through a straw. My skin went cold. I sat up in bed, bare feet on concrete, and told myself, it's the radio bleeding through. It's pipes knocking. It's water moving. It's your brain, dumbass. You're underground. Still, I got up. I didn't turn my flashlight on because I didn't want my father waking up and deciding my curiosity was rebellion. I knew the bunker by feel. I'd walked it half asleep 100 times. The whispering pulled me toward the bathroom. Halfway there, I almost tripped over a flashlight lying on its side on the floor. The beam pointed at the wall like an abandoned eye. It was Owen's flashlight. My throat tightened. I stepped around it, moved quietly, and peeked around the corner. Owen stood on his tiptoes with his head shoved into the sink basin, ear pressed near the faucet like he was listening for a heartbeat. His hands gripped the edge. Every few seconds, he turned his mouth toward the drain and muttered something. That low voice rolled up again from inside the plumbing, answering him in that smooth gibberish. Not loud, not angry, just present, like it had all the time in the world. I stood there, frozen, trying to decide if I was dreaming, and Owen suddenly stopped. Slowly, he lifted his head and turned it toward me. There was no light. My eyes had adjusted, but still, there was no way he could see me clearly. He saw me anyway. His smile was small, confident, like he'd been hoping I'd follow. My stomach flipped. I backed up without making a sound and walked back to my cot like my legs belonged to someone else. I didn't sleep. In the morning, Owen acted normal. That's what messed with me. He ate breakfast. He complained about chores. He kicked his ball down the hallway. He even hugged Lacey around the waist and asked her to play the good song on the piano. But there was this new thing in his eyes, like a little curtain had been pulled back and something older was peeking through. I tried to tell myself it was a phase. Kids do weird shit when they're isolated. We'd been living underground. No sunlight, no friends, just family and scripture and the same food, the same air. The air, by the way, started to feel different around then. Not bad, just heavy, like breathing through a blanket. My father insisted the ventilation system was fine. Grant checked it, nodded, said it was fine. But the bunker always smelled faintly of paint and canned food and damp concrete. And once he noticed it, you couldn't stop noticing it. A few days later, I walked past the room Owen shared with Micah and heard only one of them snoring. Micah's snore was loud and constant, like a saw. Owen usually snored too. Soft little kid snores. That night, there was nothing from his cot. I peeked in. Owen lay on his back, wide awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. His body was rigid, like he was pretending to be asleep, so well he forgot to breathe. I whispered his name. Owen. He didn't blink. I left, because something about it made my teeth ache. The next night, I heard whispering again and forced myself not to go look. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself Rule 3 was just my father being theatrical to keep us scared and obedient. But the third time it happened, I couldn't help it. I got up, crept to the kitchen, and listened from the hallway where I could pretend I was just getting water if someone caught me. Owen was in the bathroom again. This time, I heard both sides clearly. Owen's voice, quiet and careful, and the voice in the pipes, deep and smooth and wrong. It wasn't English. It wasn't Spanish. It wasn't anything my brain could label. It sounded like a language designed for throats shaped differently than ours. And Owen answered it, matching that cadence like he'd been practicing. When I backed away, my foot brushed the wall. The pipes ticked. Owen's whispering stopped instantly. I held my breath. A second later, Owen spoke in normal English, loud enough for me to hear from where I was hiding. "You're still awake," he said. I didn't move. He chuckled, a sound a 7-year-old shouldn't have. "Tell Dad," he said like he was daring me. Then he went back to whispering, and the voice in the pipes rolled up like it was amused. I didn't tell Dad right away. That's the part I'm not proud of. I waited because I knew what my father would do with it. He'd turn it into proof. A sign. A test. He'd squeeze it until it fit his story. And maybe I was scared of Owen too. I didn't want to be alone with him while my father decided how to handle a sign. So I tried the stupid approach first. I asked Dad questions about the bunker like I was curious. "Did you supervise all of this yourself?" I asked one day while we were restocking shelves. "Yes," he said without looking up. "Is there like anywhere else?" I asked. "Other rooms." Grant looked at me sharp, like he knew what I was asking without me saying it. Dad laughed once. "You've been reading too much," he said. "There are no hidden passages, no secret rooms, no nonsense. This is a shelter, not a castle." Then he wiped his hands, pointed at the laminated sheet on the table, and said, "The procedures are there for a reason. Follow them." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the collar and say, "You wrote them, Dad. You wrote the drain one. Why? What do you know?" But in our family, you didn't grab Dad by the collar. You didn't even raise your voice to him unless you were ready to pay for it. A week later, the radio started telling us the world above was on fire. Va. That's what the announcer said, like it had always been the next domino. There were reports of unrest, then conflict, then casualties, then deployments. The voice sounded frantic, like the man was reading the end of the world off a script and trying to keep up. My father sat us down for the daily hour and listened like a starving man listens to food sizzling. "This is it," he said when the broadcast ended. His eyes shone. "Pestilence. Va. Next comes famine. Then death. We are exactly where we're meant to be." Micah looked pale. Lacey clutched her Bible like it could stop bullets. Grant's jaw clenched because Grant was the only one who ever seemed to understand that my father's excitement was its own kind of sickness. I sat there thinking about the voice in the pipes and how it had sounded weirdly like the announcer's cadence sometimes, like a mimic learning a rhythm. After a few days of war reports, I started hearing little mistakes in the broadcast. Words pronounced wrong, not like an accent, but like someone had learned the word by reading it and never heard it spoken. Weird pauses, sentences that didn't land right. Once, the announcer said county like county and then corrected himself too fast like he'd realized he was supposed to know better. Grant noticed too. I saw it in his face. He waited until Dad left the room one night and leaned close to me while we washed dishes in hot boiled water. "You ever feel like that radio guy is off?" he murmured. My throat tightened. I kept my voice low. "Yeah." Grant's eyes flicked toward the pipes above us, like he's not who he says he is. I almost told him about Owen. I almost spilled it right then because it would have felt like letting air out of a pressure cooker. But Owen walked into the kitchen barefoot, silent as a cat, and stared at us with that little knowing smile. Grant shut his mouth. He shut mina. Owen picked up a clean spoon, licked it, and put it back in the drying rack. "Gross," Micah said from the doorway, but he didn't come closer. He didn't want to be within reach of Owen anymore. None of us did. Owen glanced at Micah, expression blank. Then he turned and walked away without a word. Micah's face went tight. "He's doing that on purpose," he whispered. "Stop," Lacey hissed from the main room. "Stop talking about him like that." "Like what?" Micah snapped, louder than he should have. "Like he's being weird?" "He's being weird." Lacey's eyes filled fast. "He's a kid," she said. "He's scared. We're all scared." Micah's voice turned sharp. "I'm scared of him." That was the first time anyone said it out loud. The first time the truth took shape in the open air. Owen heard it. He had to. Sound carried. That night, Micah didn't sleep. I could hear him shifting on his cot, breathing hard. Owen lay still. Too still. By the time winter came again, our second winter underground, marked only by my father's calendar and the slight change in how cold the concrete felt, Owen had changed completely. He didn't run down the hall anymore. He didn't laugh loud. He didn't cry over ants. He watched. He had a way of appearing around corners like he'd been standing there the whole time, listening. If you swore when you stubbed your toe, he'd report to Dad. If you took an extra scoop of food, he'd watch you chew like he was counting. He also started saying things he shouldn't know. I'd catch myself zoning out during scripture lectures, thinking about a book I'd hidden, and later Owen would slide past me in the hallway and murmur, "He sees you drifting." Not Dad. He. Like there was another set of eyes in the bunker that mattered more. Lacey started doing Owen's chores. Not because she loved him, because she looked scared of him. Like he had something on her. Like he'd seen her crying alone and filed it away to use later. Grant tried to keep a leash on the situation by sheer force of older brother energy. He'd assign Owen little tasks. He'd make jokes too loudly. He'd roughhouse with him, trying to pull the kid back into being a kid. Owen didn't roughhouse back. He'd stand there while Grant mussed his hair, staring at him with those flat eyes, and then say something like, "You're loud when you're afraid." And Grant would go quiet. Then, early in year 2, Owen started prophesying. It happened at dinner on a Friday. We were eating canned beef stew stretched with water because supplies had to last. My father said a blessing that went on too long. The air in the main room felt thick, damp, like the bunker was sweating. Halfway through chewing, Owen's eyes rolled up. He gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. His shoulders tensed. His lips parted. Then he spoke in a voice that did not belong to a 7-year-old boy. "At 6:06, he said, slow and clear, "the beast wakes." Micah dropped his spoon. Lacey gasped. Grant froze. My father's chair scraped back. He stood like a man in church hearing his name called by God. Owen blinked fast and slumped back down like he'd fallen asleep sitting up. He grabbed his spoon like nothing happened and started eating again. My father looked at us with this wild joy in his eyes, like he'd just gotten a personal phone call from heaven. "Tongues," he whispered. "The spirit moves." Grant's face went pale. "Dad," he said, voice tight. That didn't sound like. My father cut him off with a raised hand. "It is not for you to judge the vessel," he snapped. Micah's voice shook. "What's 6:06? My father looked at the clock on the wall like it was a prophecy machine. "We watch," he said. At 6 o'clock, Dad turned the radio on. The usual doom spilled out. War reports, shortages, riots, disease. Then, right at 6:06, the radio emitted a screech so sharp it felt like needles in my ears. People screamed on the broadcast. Not one person. Many. Like a crowd. Then the signal cut dead. Silence flooded the room. The clock's second hand ticked loud. Dad's breath came fast. He stared at Owen like Owen was an angel. Micah started crying, quiet and furious. Grant stood up. "That's not normal," he said. "That's not." Dad rounded on him. "It is a sign," he hissed, "and you will not poison your siblings with doubt." Owen watched Grant the way a cat watches a mouse. Later that night, when I went to the bathroom, I caught Owen in the hallway. He'd been standing there in the dark like he'd been waiting. He leaned close to my ear and whispered he liked that. I flinched. "Who?" Owen's smile showed teeth. "The one who listens." He walked away, bare feet silent. After that, my father treated Owen like he could do no wrong. He'd pat his head during prayer. He'd ask him questions like he wanted more prophecies. He'd excuse his cruelty because the spirit is heavy on him. Meanwhile, something else started happening. Food started disappearing. At first it was small, an extra can gone, a missing pack of rice. My father assumed miscount. Then he assumed rats, even though we'd never seen vermin down there. Then he assumed one of us. He called a family meeting after breakfast one morning, which in our bunker meant he sat at the table with his notebook and made us stand like suspects. Our supplies are disappearing, he said calmly. Calmly, like the calm before punishment. If someone is stealing, confess now. There will be mercy. Micah looked stunned. Lacey's face crumpled. Grant's hands clenched. I felt anger flare. Why would anyone steal? I snapped. We're all eating the same crap. Dad's eyes cut to me. You will watch your tone, he said. Owen nodded thoughtfully, like he'd expected this conversation. We began rationing, Dad continued. Because someone is selfish. No, Lacey said, voice shaking. No, Dad, we're not. Dad slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked in the small space. Enough, Micah whispered. It's him, but he didn't say who. His eyes darted to Owen. Owen looked back at Micah and smiled. After the meeting, Grant cornered me by the pump station. He's doing something, Grant murmured. Owen, he's messing with the supplies. I finally told him. I told him about the whispering in the sink, about the voice in the pipes. Grant stared at me like I'd punched him. Then his face tightened into determination. Okay, he said. Okay, we watch him. We catch him. You can't, I said. He disappears. Grant's jaw clenched. Then we stopped being predictable. We tried. For a few days, Grant and I shadowed Owen in shifts without making it obvious. Owen noticed anyway. He'd turn and look directly at where you were standing like he could smell attention. One afternoon, while Dad was in the main room muttering prayers over his notebook, I found Grant crouched by the table, staring at the laminated procedure sheet. He tapped the yellow post-it with one finger. Don't get creative, he murmured. What? I asked. Grant's voice was low. Dad wrote this like he wrote it for someone else. He flicked the corner of the laminated sheet, and I saw something I hadn't noticed. The lamination wasn't perfect. Under the plastic, there were older marks, faint like someone had erased and rewritten parts. Rule 3, Grant said. He didn't just invent that. He learned it. My stomach tightened. From who? Grant's eyes went to the wall where pipes ran behind paint. From whatever's listening. That night, Owen confronted Grant in the hallway. I didn't see the beginning. I heard it. Grant's voice, tight and angry, and Owen's voice, calm and soft. You don't own this place, Grant said. Owen giggled. You don't either. What are you doing with the food? Grant demanded. Owen's tone turned almost gentle. It goes where it belongs. Grant stepped closer, and I heard the scrape of his bare heel on concrete. Stop talking in riddles. Owen's voice dropped, and for a second, it wasn't a kid at all. Someone hears you, he said. Someone hears when you lie. Grant's response was a curse. A real one. Loud. A second later, my father's voice boomed from the main room. Grant. Grant went silent. Owen laughed again, higher now, satisfied, and padded away down the hallway. The next morning, my father found a torn open box of crackers in the storage area. Crumbs scattered like evidence. This is what I mean, Dad said, holding it up like a sin offering. This is what selfishness looks like. Micah's face went red. It's Owen, he blurted. He's. Lacey slapped Micah's arm hard. Stop, she hissed. Stop it. Dad's eyes narrowed. You will not accuse your brother without proof, he said. Owen stood behind Dad's shoulder, hands folded, looking like an angel in a Sunday school picture. His eyes met mine. He gave me the smallest nod, like we shared a joke. I felt sick. The theft kept happening. Cans vanished. Rice thinned. My father's notebook became a frantic mess of recalculations. The calendar on the wall stopped feeling like a countdown to salvation and started feeling like a countdown to starvation. Then Owen prophesied again. It was after prayer. We were all on our knees, foreheads pressed to our knuckles, the concrete cold even through thin blankets. My father's voice droned about endurance, about tests. About faith. Owen's breathing changed. I could hear it. Then he whispered, not in that deep voice this time, but in his own, almost like he was repeating something he'd been told. "The faithful will be tested," he said. "Do not waver." My father lifted his head with tears in his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes." Grant's face went tight. He stared at Owen like he wanted to shake him. A few days later, Grant told us at breakfast that he had an announcement. He stood up, shoulders squared. "I know who's taking the food," he said. Owen cut in instantly, voice bright. "So do I." Grant's head snapped toward him. "Owen, shut up." Owen's smile widened. He pointed at Grant with a small, steady finger. "It's him," Owen said, loud enough for Dad to hear from the kitchen. "Grant is the thief." Grant went white. "What? No." Dad stormed in. "Explain," he barked. Grant's hand shook. "Dad, he's lying." Owen's voice turned cold. "Someone hears you," he said. "Someone hears when you lie." Micah whispered, "No, no, no," like he already knew how this played out. Grant's eyes flashed to me, desperate. "Tell him," he mouthed. "Tell Dad. Tell the truth." But my father's gaze was on Grant, heavy as a hand on the back of your neck. "I raised you better than this," Dad said, voice low. "Confess." Grant's voice broke. "I didn't." Dad's face twisted in rage. "You will not lie to me in God's house," he snarled. "It's not God's house." Grant shot back before he could stop himself. "It's your fucking hole." Silence slammed down. My father's hand came up so fast it cracked across Grant's face. The slap echoed down the halls. Owen smiled. That night, Grant didn't eat. He sat on his cot and stared at the ceiling like he was trying to burn a hole through the earth with his eyes. Micah tried to talk to him. Grant snapped at him. Lacey cried. Dad prayed, louder like volume could fix anything. Owen wandered the bunker, humming a tune I didn't recognize, something that sounded like a lullaby if the person singing it didn't understand comfort. I heard whispering in the pipes all night, not just in the bathroom, everywhere, like the bunker itself was talking under its skin. I barely slept. In the morning, Grant didn't wake up. Micah found him first. I'll never forget Micah's scream, sharp and ugly and adult. It ripped through the bunker and made my heart slam into my ribs. We crowded around Grant's cot. His eyes were half open. His lips were slightly parted. There was no sign of struggle. No blood. No bruises. Just stopped. My father pressed 2 fingers to Grant's neck, then yanked his hand back like he'd been burned. "No, that guisperth. No, no, no." Micah sobbed and shook Grant's shoulder, begging him like begging could restart a heart. Lacey collapsed to her knees. I stood there numb, staring at Owen. Owen stood at the foot of the cot, hands clasped, expression solemn. He looked like he was at a funeral. Then, very quietly, he whispered, "Judgment." My father did not open the hatch. He didn't even consider it out loud. We were too deep in his story now. Grant's death became another sign, another proof that the outside world was too dangerous for us to risk burial. My father said if we opened the door, we'd let in the plague, the violence, the demons of a dying world. So we did what you do when you're trapped underground with a body and no options. We cut him up. My father did it himself in the kitchen with the meat cleaver. The same cleaver he'd used to chop frozen meat blocks and smash stubborn cans. I stood in the doorway because I couldn't make myself leave and I couldn't make myself help. Micah gagged and ran to the bathroom. Lacey whispered prayers so fast they blurred. I stared at the floor and listened to the wet, terrible sounds of my father swinging steel into flesh. The worst part wasn't even the sounds. It was my father sobbing. Big, shaking sobs between swings, like he was breaking in half while he did it. Owen sat at the table, swinging his legs, humming softly, like it was dinner theater. After that, the bunker didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a trap with white paint. We moved through routines because that's what people do when they can't face their reality. We cleaned, we rationed, we prayed. Lacey played the piano less because every sound echoed too hard and made grief feel louder. Micah stopped laughing entirely. He flinched if Owen came near him. My father's hair started going gray at the temples. He began pacing the halls at night, murmuring scripture under his breath like he was trying to build a wall out of words. Then the bunker started breaking. First, the lights went out in the hallway leading to Owen and Micah's sleeping area. One day, they were fine. The next, that wing was dark. The switches did nothing. My father muttered about chewed wires, about bad connections. We'd never seen a rat, but he talked like rats were a comforting explanation. Rule 4 sat on the table in that laminated sheet, staring at us. If the lights go out in a hallway, you don't go down that hallway until I've checked it. My father checked it with Grant's old flashlight and came back pale, saying he'd fix it later. He didn't. Soon after, leaks appeared in that same wing. At first it was a drip, then another, then a steady, maddening patter that made the air smell like mildew and metal. We patched what we could with sealant, but every patch seemed to invite 2 more leaks. Owen slept down there anyway, in the damp and dark, like it soothed him. Micah started sleeping in the main room instead, claiming he couldn't stand the dripping. My father let him, which should have told me how scared even Dad was of forcing Micah to be alone with Owen. Then, one morning, the water turned to sludge. I turned the faucet and it sputtered, then spit out a gray paste that smelled like wet pennies and old teeth. It oozed into the sink and sat there thick, refusing to run down the drain like it didn't want to go back. I froze with my hands under the tap, skin crawling. Micah came running in. "What the fuck is that?" he gasped. Lacey covered her mouth. "Don't touch it," she whispered. My father stormed in, took one look, and his face did something I'd never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Not preaching fear. Not the world is sinful fear. Practical fear. We can serve, he snapped. We pray. God will provide. For 3 days, we had almost no water. My father doled out sips like medicine. We stopped showering. We stopped washing dishes properly. Our mouths tasted like old Kent salt. Our throats felt raw. The air got thicker. On the 3rd day, my father stood in the main room, staring at the hatch key around his neck like it was a snake. I could see the thought behind his eyes. Should we leave? Should we risk it? He didn't say it out loud. Saying it out loud would have been admitting doubt. Then the water came back. Clear, cold, beautiful. It flowed from the tap like a miracle, and we reacted like animals. We shoved each other out of the way, cupping hands under the stream, drinking too fast, choking, laughing, and crying at the same time. Even my father, the man who lectured us about self-control, drank like he hadn't seen water in a year. Rule 5 sat on the table in the main room. Boil water 20 minutes before drinking, even if it looks clear, especially if it looks clear. None of us boiled it. A few hours later, my stomach turned. Not nausea like a normal sick. This was a hard, sudden twist like someone had grabbed my intestines and wrung them out. I made it to the shower room, just in time to vomit black liquid into the floor drain. Not dark brown, not coffee, black, thin and shiny like oil. My body convulsed until my ribs ached. I spat and gagged and cried because it didn't make sense. I had eaten canned stew and drank water. How was I throwing up something that looked like engine fluid? Lacey crawled into the shower room a minute later and collapsed beside me, vomiting the same black slick. My father stumbled in after that, face gray, and dropped to his knees, retching prayers between heaves. Micah didn't get sick. Owen didn't get sick either. Micah paced outside the shower room, panicking, shouting for Dad, then remembering Dad was on the floor, choking on black sludge. Micah slammed his fist into the wall hard enough to scrape skin off his knuckles. "This is because of him," Micah sobbed, pointing down the hall toward the dark wing. "This is because of Owen." Owen appeared behind him like he'd been summoned. Micah flinched back like he'd been struck. Owen tilted his head, listening, and smiled faintly. He gave it back. He whispered like he was talking to someone else. "He's generous." Micah lunged at him. "What did you do?" Owen didn't move. He just watched Micah like Micah was a barking dog. Micah stopped short, trembling because somewhere deep down he knew if he actually touched Owen, something would happen. Something worse. I don't remember everything after that. Fever took me. Time smeared. I remember lying on the shower room floor, cheek against tile, feeling the drain's cold breath on my face. I remember Lacey curled in the corner, naked because she'd stripped her clothes off like they were burning her, making animal sounds that didn't sound like her. I remember my father in front of the cracked mirror, slamming his forehead into it and begging God to forgive him again and again until blood ran down his nose and mixed with the black vomit on the floor. I remember dreams that didn't feel like dreams. In one, I was underwater, but the water was thick and black and warm, and something was singing through metal around me. A lullaby in a language that made my teeth hurt. In another, Owen crawled along the ceiling with his head turned backward, smiling at me while his body moved the wrong way. At some point, I must have passed out completely because when I came back to myself, 3 days had gone by. The mirror in the shower room was shattered. Glass glittered in the corners like ice. The black slick was gone, cleaned up, but the air still smelled wrong like pennies and rot. Lacey lay on her cot in the main room, eyes open but empty. My father sat at the table staring at the laminated procedures sheet like it had betrayed him. Micah looked like he'd aged 5 years. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands shook when he lifted a cup. Owen sat on the floor in the dark wing's doorway, humming that lullaby, completely untouched. My father cleared his throat like he was swallowing shame. From now on, he said hoarsely, we follow the procedures exactly. Micah barked a laugh that sounded like pain. Now you give a shit? My father's eyes flashed. You will respect me, he snapped, but his voice didn't have its old power anymore. It wobbled. He tapped Rule 5 with a shaking finger. 20 minutes, he whispered. We boil it. Every time. That meant fuel. That meant power. That meant less light. And because the bunker already had a wing with dead lights and a growing damp rot, less light didn't feel like an inconvenience. It felt like getting buried deeper. After the sickness, I stopped walking through dark halls without my flashlight. I hated the way my beam cut through the bunker like a blade, showing too much and not enough. I hated the way shadows seemed to move just outside the light's edge. I especially hated walking past the bathroom, because even when Owen wasn't there, I'd swear I could hear something moving inside the pipes. A soft tick-tick like fingernails. A low murmur just below hearing, like someone talking in the next room with the door closed. Once, I stood over the shower drain, stomach tight, and whispered, hello. Nothing answered. I laughed at myself, shaky and embarrassed, and walked out. Behind me, the pipe gave a soft metallic groan like laughter. By the start of what my father called year 3 of trial, Lacey's body started changing. At first it was subtle. She ate less, moved slower, slept more. Then her stomach began to swell. She tried to hide it under loose shirts, but we were living in a bunker with no privacy. You can't hide a growing belly when everyone eats the same ration and you're suddenly shaped different. Micah noticed first and stared too long. I noticed next and felt a cold dread settle in my gut because there weren't many explanations underground. My father noticed last because he was always the last to see things he didn't want to see. When he didn't react like a normal man. He didn't ask who. He didn't rage. He didn't even look at Grant's empty cot in the corner like it might hold an answer. He smiled. A miracle, he whispered, eyes wet. An immaculate conception. A sign. Lacey stood there with her arms crossed over her stomach, face pale, looking like she wanted to disappear into the wall. Dad, she said softly, please don't. My father raised a hand. Don't question God's gifts, he said. Micah's voice shook, sharp as broken glass. It's not a gift, he hissed. Owen appeared behind him, silent, and said, almost lovingly, don't say it wrong. Micah shut his mouth. I stared at Lacey's belly and did the math in my head until it hurt. My mind tried to reject the conclusion, tried to reach for anything else, some weird swelling from malnutrition, some tumor, some delusion. But Lacey's eyes met mine, and in that look I saw terror so pure it made my mouth go dry. Because she knew too, and somewhere in the walls, deep in the pipes, something shifted like it was listening closer. I didn't say anything out loud after that. Not at first. I just sat there at the table, listening to the drip in the dark wing, watching my father's face shine with this stupid, hungry hope, like the bunker hadn't already chewed through our family and spit out bones. Lacey's stomach kept growing, and Owen kept watching. It's hard to explain how a kid can make you feel like you're the one who's small. He wasn't taller. He wasn't stronger. He was still a little boy with skinny wrists and a cowlick that never stayed down. But he moved like he knew where you'd be before you did. If I left my cot at night, he'd be in the hallway when I came back, just standing there, eyes half-lidded like a cat that never sleeps. If Micah whispered anything mean about Dad under his breath, Owen would repeat it later in front of everyone with that innocent tone that made it worse. "Micah said you're losing it," Owen would announce, and then tilt his head like he was curious what punishment looked like today. Micah started clenching his jaw so hard his cheeks hurt. He'd hold it all day, all night, until he snapped over something stupid, someone bumping his shoulder, a kid falling off a shelf, and then Dad would pounce and Owen would smile. I tried to talk to Lacey alone once, in the storage room where the air smelled like metal and stale cardboard. "You didn't," I started, voice low, because even whispers carried. "It wasn't." Lacey cut me off fast. "Don't," she breathed. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was flat. "Don't make me say it." I swallowed. "Did he?" She shook her head once, sharp. "I don't know," she whispered, and that was the worst thing she could have said. I don't remember all of it. I remember waking up. I remember water sounds. I remember the drain. My stomach twisted. Lacey pressed her palms to her belly like she was trying to keep whatever was inside from pushing out. "If Dad calls it a miracle one more time," she said, voice shaking now, "I'm going to scream until my throat rips." "He's scared," I said, even though it tasted like lies. "He's clinging to what?" She snapped, sudden heat. "To being right? To the idea God's texting him through my uterus." I flinched because I'd never heard her talk like that. Lacey had always been the soft one, the peacekeeper, the one who played music so Dad wouldn't explode. Now she looked like she wanted a bite. A soft step behind us made my skin go cold. Owen stood in the storage room doorway, face calm, hands at his sides. Lacey's words died in her throat. Owen smiled like he'd just heard something funny. "He doesn't like when you talk ugly," he said. Lacey's voice came out small. "Get out." Owen didn't move. "You should rest," he told her, gentle. "You're carrying something important." His eyes slid to me. "You're carrying something too," he added, like he was tasting the thought. Then he turned and padded away, silent as always. Lacey's hand shook. "I can't do this," she whispered. I wanted to say, then we leave. We go up. We run into the woods. We take our chances in the real world instead of dying in a painted concrete hole. But my father had the key, the only key, and he wore it like an organ. So we stayed. Rationing got worse. My father's notebook became a mess of crossed-out numbers. He blamed selfishness, but couldn't name the selfish person without proof. Every so often, he'd stare at Micah with suspicion, because Micah was angry and anger looked guilty in Dad's mind. Micah would flare up and yell back, and Dad would slap him or shove him into a wall, and Owen would watch like it was a show. I tried, once, to corner Owen when Dad was in the shower and Micah was asleep. He was in the hallway near the dark wing, humming. That lullaby again, the one that made my molars ache. "Owen," I said, voice firm. He stopped humming, but he didn't turn. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Where's the food going?" Owen turned his head slowly. His eyes looked wrong in the half-light. Not red or glowing, just too knowing. Too calm. "It goes down," he said. "That's not an answer." He smiled. "It's the only answer." My hands clenched into fists. "Stop it." Owen's smile faded. For a second, I saw something older behind it. Something that didn't fit in a kid's face. "You don't tell me to stop," he said softly. Not Owen soft. Something else soft. My throat went dry. Dad is going to... Owen's eyes flicked toward the main room. He's mine, he whispered, like Dad was property. Then just like that, the kid mask slid back on. He shrugged. Don't get creative, he said, repeating Dad's post-it phrase like it was a joke. He walked away. I stood there in the hallway, shaking, staring at the dark wing like it could stare back. The bunker kept breaking in ways that felt personal. The damp hallway started stinking like sour towels. Mold crept along the seams where the concrete met the baseboards. The drip turned into a steady, maddening patter that never stopped. Even when you weren't in that wing, you could hear it faintly through the walls, like a heartbeat you couldn't escape. Then our cough started. Micah first, a dry hacking cough that made his chest hurt. Then me. Then Dad, who insisted it was dust and lack of fresh air and nothing to worry about. Even as his voice got hoarse and he started waking up at night to spit. Lacey's cough came last, soft and wet, like she was trying not to disturb whatever was sleeping in her belly. I started cleaning more than anyone should, scrubbing walls, wiping mildew, boiling rags, mopping puddles. It didn't help. The bunker felt like it was sweating through paint. Owen loved the dark wing. He'd sit in the doorway, barefoot in puddles, humming to the drip. Sometimes I'd hear him whispering down there, not into a sink this time, but into the wet wall itself, murmuring that garbled language like prayer. Dad pretended not to notice. Or maybe he genuinely didn't, because Dad only saw what fed his story. He started preaching louder, longer, more frantic. He'd pace while he talked, waving his Bible like a weapon. The world above is burning, he'd say. We are spared. We are tested. The enemy prowls. The faithful endure. Micah would sit with his arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes dead. Lacey stopped playing the piano entirely once her belly got too big for her to sit comfortably at the bench. The piano sat there like an unused mouth. Grant's absence became a physical thing, a cold spot in the room, a missing sound. And still, month after month, Lacey did not give birth. My sense of time got warped underground. Without sunlight, weeks smeared. My father tried to keep us anchored with his calendar, crossing off days with a thick marker like he was killing them. But I know what I saw. I know what Lacey told me with her eyes when she couldn't say it out loud. I know what her body did. 15 months. 15 months of swelling. Her skin stretched thin, veins visible like bluish rivers. Her face got sharp from lack of food. Her collarbones stuck out like handles. She should have been dead from the strain. Instead, she grew. My father called it God's timing. He said we were witnessing something holy. Micah finally snapped one day while Dad was praying over Lacey's belly, hand pressed to it like he was blessing a bomb. Stop touching her, Micah spat. Dad's eyes flew open. Watch yourself. She's not a fucking altar, Micah hissed. His voice broke halfway through. She's my sister. Dad stepped forward, anger rising. You will not speak that way, in your hole. Micah cut in, and his mouth twisted around the word like he wanted to spit it. You're going to kill us down here. Owen appeared in the doorway like he'd been summoned by conflict. Micah saw him and flinched back, but he didn't shut up this time. He was past fear. And you, he said to Owen, voice shaking, you little. Owen's smile was small. Don't, he warned, like he was saving Micah from a bad choice. Micah's eyes filled. Why, he choked. Why are you doing this? Owen tilted his head, listening to something none of us could hear. Because he asked, Owen said softly. Who? I demanded before I could stop myself. Owen looked at me like I was slow. The one with ears, he murmured. Dad's face tightened. Enough, he barked. Micah, you will apologize. Owen, go to your cot. Lacey laughed suddenly. It was a broken sound that made my hair stand up. Stop saying my name like it's a spell, she whispered. Dad froze. Lacey's eyes were glassy. She looked down at her belly like it disgusted her. I'm not holy, she said, voice low. I'm not chosen. I'm just full. Dad swallowed hard. Lacey, he whispered, and the way he said it wasn't fatherly. It was terrified. Owen's smile widened. Rest, he told her. Lacey turned her head away and didn't speak again for days. After that, Dad started unraveling in quieter ways. He'd start projects and abandon them. He'd stack cans and then knock them down and res-tack them like if he organized enough, God would notice. He'd stand at the radio during the daily hour and stare at it, listening too hard, like he wanted it to tell him he was right. Sometimes the broadcast would slip into that awful static again, and Dad would freeze, eyes shining, like he was waiting for messages. Rule 2 sat on the table, ignored. If the broadcast turns to static, you turn it off immediately, and you do not listen for messages. Dad didn't turn it off. He leaned closer. One day, during a static burst, I heard a voice under the noise. Not clear, not words, just a cadence that made my skin crawl because it matched something I'd heard before. The voice in the pipes. Dad's lips parted. Yes, he whispered like someone was speaking directly to him. I reached out and shut the radio off. Dad whipped around and slapped my hand away hard. Don't, he snapped. My eyes flashed. You wrote the rule. Dad's face twisted like I'd insulted God. I wrote it to stop you from doing stupid things, he hissed. Not me. Owen chuckled from the doorway. He likes it, he said. Dad's anger deflated into something like shame, and for a second he looked like an old man in a hole, not a prophet. Then he straightened and said, You will not question what I'm doing. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked away and felt the bunker's walls close tighter around my ribs. By the end of the 4th year, because yes, it was nearly 4 full years underground by then, we were done. Supplies were nearly gone. Our clothes hung off us. The skin on my hands cracked from constant cleaning and boiling and sealing leaks. And Lacey still hadn't given birth. She didn't even talk anymore. She lay in her cot with her hands folded over her belly, eyes half closed, breathing shallow. She looked like she was conserving energy like a dying animal. Dad would sit beside her and pray. Sometimes he'd cry. Sometimes he'd mutter angry scripture under his breath like he was blaming her for not delivering his salvation. Micah avoided her because he couldn't stand the sight. He'd sit in the corner, knees to chest, rocking slightly like he was trying to calm his nervous system without anyone noticing. Owen would sit by Lacey's cot sometimes and hum to her belly. Not to her, to it. One afternoon, I was spooning thin vegetable broth into Lacey's mouth, just trying to keep her alive, and her eyes snapped open. Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was stronger than it should have been. Listen, she rasped. My breath caught. Lacey, her eyes were wide and wet. It's moving, she whispered. I swallowed. Babies move. Her face twisted. Not like this. She yanked my hand down onto her stomach. Under her skin, something pushed back. Not a gentle roll, not a kick, a pulse. A steady, deliberate thump, like something tapping from the inside. My stomach dropped. My skin went cold. I tried to pull my hand away, but she held me there. Tell me you feel it, she begged. I felt it. Then the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a dim. Out. Like someone had cut the bunker's throat. The hum of the pump station died. The ventilation fans slowed to silence. The world shrank into blackness and dripping. Lacey screamed. It wasn't just pain. It was terror, a raw sound that made my throat tighten. Micah shouted something, stumbling. I heard him collide with the table. A king clattered to the floor and rolled. Dad's voice boomed, strained. Stay calm. I fumbled for my flashlight, hands shaking, and the beam sputtered weakly to life. The batteries were dying. The light was dimmer than it should have been, more yellow than white. In that weak beam, I saw Lacey's face contort as her belly tightened. Her breath came in harsh gasps. Sweat stood out on her forehead. She clawed at the blanket like she could rip it apart and get out of herself. Dad stood frozen at the foot of her cot, cross and key hanging against his chest, his face pulled tight in panic. Micah hovered near the doorway, shaking, eyes wild. And Owen stood at Lacey's side like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. Owen's face was calm, impassive, almost bored. I tried to move toward Lacey, but Owen's hand shot out and grabbed the back of my shirt. His grip was small, but iron. "Leave," he said. My heart hammered. "No." Owen's eyes flicked up to mine, and the calm slipped for a second, revealing something sharp. "Leave," he repeated. Dad's voice cracked. "Owen, what are you?" Owen didn't look at Dad. "Open the door," he said, like he was issuing an order. Dad's hand went to the key instinctively. He swallowed. We pray first." Owen's mouth twitched. "No," he said soft. Lacey screamed again, and the sound turned into a sob, and then a gurgling gasp as her body clenched. I looked at Dad, desperate. "Do something." Dad's eyes were wide. Owen tugged my shirt harder. "Leave," he hissed, and this time there was no child in his voice at all. I should have fought him. I should have stayed with my sister. I should have done 100 things. Instead, I did what fear always trained me to do in that bunker. I obeyed the loudest force in the room. I backed away. Lacey's eyes locked on mine, pleading, furious, betrayed. She reached toward me, and I flinched back like her hand was fire. I retreated into the hallway, flashlight beams shaking, my chest tight like someone had tied rope around it. Behind me, I heard Owen start singing. That lullaby. The same wrong tune, the same wrong language, now louder, steady, almost soothing. Lacey's screams rose and fell beneath it. I stood in the hallway with my back against the concrete wall, breathing hard, listening to my sister suffer while a 7-year-old sang to something being born. Tom did weird things after that. Minutes stretched. Seconds snapped. My flashlight beam dimmed further. The bunker felt colder without the fans. The air got thick, stale wet. Every drip sounded like a countdown. Micah stumbled out at one point, face pale, eyes wide. "I can't," he whispered. I grabbed his arm. "Help me," I hissed. "We have to." Micah shook his head hard. "He won't let us," he whispered. "He won't let me close." From inside the room, Lacey's screams suddenly changed. Less sharp, more ragged. Then there was a wet sound that made my stomach turn. Then silence for a beat. Then a baby cried. It wasn't a normal newborn cry. It was too loud, too strong, like lungs that had been waiting years to scream. Dad stumbled into the hallway, flashlight in his hand, eyes bright with hysterical hope. "It lives," he whispered. "It lives." Owen's singing stopped. A second later, Owen stepped into the hallway carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. The baby wailed from inside, the sound thin and furious. Owen rocked it gently, like he'd done this before. Dad's face crumpled with relief. "Praise God," he breathed, and he stepped toward Owen, hands out like he wanted to hold the miracle. Owen held the bundle just out of reach, and his eyes met Dad's. "It's time," Owen said. Dad swallowed. "Time for what?" Owen's voice was calm, almost kind. "Open the door." Dad's hand tightened around the flashlight. His other hand clutched the key on his chest like it was a heartbeat. "We can't," he said, voice shaking. "Not yet. We don't know what's up there." Owen tilted his head like he was listening again. "We know," he said. Dad's eyes darted toward the hatch hallway, then back. "I need to pray." Owen's mouth twitched. He looked down at the bundle and then, casually, sat on the floor. The baby's cry changed instantly. It took on a higher pitch like something angry. Dad hesitated, torn between the crying bundle and the key. Owen stepped backward into the kitchen darkness. I didn't see what Owen grabbed. I just heard the scrape of metal. My blood turned to ice. Dad crouched to lift the bundle, whispering, "Hush, hush, it's okay." Owen stepped out of the kitchen with the meat cleaver raised in both hands. Dad looked up, and for a split second his face held confusion more than fear. Like his brain refused to accept what his eyes were telling him. "Owen," he breathed. The cleaver came down into Dad's leg with a wet crunch. Dad screamed and collapsed, the sound tearing out of him. The flashlight fell, bounced, rolled, casting wild light across the floor. Owen lifted the cleaver again. Dad tried to crawl, dragging his leg, leaving a smear that looked black in the dim light. "Owen!" Dad howled. "Stop! In God's name." Owen brought the cleaver down into Dad's shoulder. Dad's scream turned into a choking sob. Micah made a sound like a strangled animal and bolted down the hallway. I didn't run to Dad. I didn't tackle Owen. I didn't do anything heroic. I ran, not away from the bunker, deeper into it. I sprinted toward Lacey's room, flashlight beam jittering, my lungs burning. I slammed into her doorway and froze. Lacey lay on the cot, limp, her face turned to the side, eyes half open like she'd been surprised at the end. The sheets under her were stained inky black. Not blood red, black, shiny, like the vomit we'd spilled months ago. The smell hit me, metal rot, something sweet and wrong beneath it. My throat closed. I stepped closer, shaking, and saw her hands folded still over her belly like she'd been holding it down even as she died. I made a sound that didn't feel human. Then, somewhere in the bunker, I heard a heavy metallic groan. The hatch. Someone was opening it. Owen had the key. My heart slammed. Panic sharpened everything. If Owen left, he'd lock me down here. If he sealed the hatch and took the key, I'd die in the dark with my sister's corpse and the drip and whatever lived in the pipes. I turned and ran. The flashlight sputtered as I sprinted, the beam thinning, darkness swallowing the edges. My bare feet slapped wet concrete. My breath sounded like someone else's. I reached the main room just in time to see a bright circle of daylight at the top of the ladder. The hatch was open, and it was closing. The circle of light shrank as metal scraped metal. "No!" I screamed, voice cracking, and I launched myself toward the ladder. My hands grabbed the rungs. I climbed like an animal, arms trembling from malnutrition, muscles screaming. The hatch was almost shut by the time I reached the top. I jammed my fingers into the gap and felt cold metal bite down. Pain flashed white. I screamed, but I didn't let go. Above me, I heard Owen's breathing. "Calm. Close. You should have stayed," he said, voice almost gentle. "Fuck you." I spat, tears pouring down my face. My fingers were crushed, numb, and burning. Owen shifted. The hatch lifted slightly, then slammed down again, trying to sever my fingers completely. I howled, my body jerking. The world narrowed to pain and the thin slice of daylight. My arms were out in the grass now, forearms scraped raw. I flailed blindly with one hand, reaching, desperate. My fingertips brushed cloth. The bundle. Owen must have carried it up. I latched onto it with my good hand and yanked with everything I had. Something inside the bundle emitted a sound that was not a baby cry. It was a thin, high, vibrating shriek like metal being twisted. Owen made a noise too, an inhuman screech that ripped out of him like he'd been gutted. In that split second, the pressure on my fingers eased as Owen jerked toward the bundle. I didn't think. I acted. I dragged the bundle toward the hatch opening and flung it down into the bunker. The bundle fell into darkness, the shriek fading into echo. Owen's scream hit a higher pitch that made my ears ring. He dropped to his knees at the hatch and plunged down after it without hesitation, like a diver after a sinking anchor. I used the moment. I yanked my mangled hands free, ripping skin, leaving smears of blood on the metal, and rolled out onto the grass. Sunlight hit me like a slap. It wasn't warm. It was harsh, too bright. My eyes flooded with tears instantly. The sky looked obscene, so wide, so blue, like it didn't care what we'd done underneath it. I staggered away from the hatch, hands held up like claws, fingers crooked, throbbing. My legs wobbled. My stomach lurched. I expected Owen to burst out after me. He didn't. I heard nothing but wind and distant birds and, faintly, the rain that had started again, a soft patter on leaves like the world mocking me with the same sound as the bunker's drip. I ran anyway. I ran through the trees, stumbling, half blind, arms flailing. Branches slapped my face. My lungs burned like they were tearing. My feet cut on rocks. I didn't know where the road was anymore. The property felt endless in the daylight, like a maze. Eventually, I found a gravel driveway and followed it like a lifeline. The stones bit into my bare feet. I left little dark spots behind me. When I hit the Tulane Road, I stepped into it and waved at the first car like a lunatic. It didn't stop. It swerved around me. The second didn't stop either. The third slowed, window lowering a crack, and a man's voice shouted, "Jesus Christ, what happened to you?" I tried to speak. My throat made a rasping sound. My mouth tasted like metal and old salt. The man's eyes went wide as he took in my bones and my ragged clothes and my hands. He didn't get out. He didn't come close. He called someone. I saw him holding his phone with shaking fingers. Police arrived. Ambulance. People in masks. Hands that touched me like I might infect them. I don't remember the ride well. I remember bright lights. I remember someone trying to pry my fingers open. I remember shouting, "The hatch," over and over like that word was the only thing I had left. They kept me in a hospital room under guard, which still makes me laugh bitterly because I wasn't the dangerous one. I was the warning. Doctors pumped fluids into me and talked about malnutrition like it was a weather report. They treated my fingers. They treated infections I didn't even know I had. They asked me questions gently at first, then less gently when my answers didn't make sense to them. "How long were you underground?" "For years." "For years. And you didn't contact anyone?" "No." "Who built it?" "My father." "Where is your father now?" "Dead." They sent psychiatrists. They sent detectives. They asked the same questions different ways, like they thought if they angled it right, the truth would fall out. I told them about the rule sheet, about the post-it, about the voice in the pipes, about Owen. Most of them stopped writing when I got to that part. They found the bunker eventually. Of course they did. It wasn't invisible. It was just hidden, and people only look for hidden things when they care. By the time they opened it, Owen was gone. The baby, if you can call it that, was gone too. They found my father in pieces. They found Lacey dead in her cot, with black ichor on the sheets. They found signs of Grant's dismemberment. They found the cleaver. They found the laminated procedures sheet on the table, smudged and curled at the edges. The yellow post is still stuck crookedly to the top. Don't get creative. And then they wrote the story they needed. The official story was clean and easy to swallow. Fanatical father isolates family. Paranoia escalates. He kills them. Then himself. Case closed. Horrible, but simple. It didn't explain why my father's leg had been hacked up from the side, like someone else had chopped it. It didn't explain the black slick in Lacey's bed. It didn't explain the damp wing, the weird wiring failures, the pipes that, according to the report, showed unusual corrosion patterns inconsistent with the age of the installation. That last part went only know because I stole a copy later. It didn't explain Owen's absence either, but they made that fit too. They decided Owen was dead somewhere in the bunker, lost, maybe dissolved, maybe eaten by animals after he escaped. They said kids disappear all the time. They shrugged it off like a missing shoe. I didn't shrug. When they released me, after I'd gained weight, after my fingers healed into stiff, crooked things, after the infection in my lungs stopped trying to kill me, I didn't go to a foster home. I didn't go to family. I didn't have anyone. I got a cheap room in a motel off the highway and stared at the ceiling every night, listening to plumbing sounds like a paranoid animal. I started researching, quietly, obsessively. I tracked down contractors who'd worked on the property, but most of them didn't remember or didn't want trouble. I contacted a geology professor at a state university about our well. I told him what I could without sounding insane. He got curious anyway, because scientists love holes. He told me the well my father had ordered drilled likely tapped into a larger subterranean reservoir, a deep aquifer system that could stretch miles. He said there were pockets, caverns, channels that nobody mapped cleanly out there. He used words like karst and subterranean flow. All I heard was, there are places down there that connect. The voice in the pipes wasn't just inside our bunker. It had a whole underground world to travel. I tried to find Owen directly. Missing kid databases, local leads, old reports, nothing solid. Then I found a podcast, not some big true crime thing with sponsors and merch. A small missing persons podcast run by two people who treated disappearances like spooky campfire stories, laughing too much between details like it was all entertainment. I hate them for that, but they gave me what I needed. 2 nights after I escaped, 2 nights after I'd staggered out onto that road half dead, a woman disappeared nearby. Her name was Jocelyn Strauss, late 20s, worked a late shift at a 24-hour breakfast place. She was driving home after midnight when she saw a little blonde boy on the side of the road in fog, holding what looked like a bundle of rags. She stopped, because people do that, because people still believe lost kid means help, not trap. According to the podcast, Jocelyn called her sister during the drive. She put her on speaker. She told her sister she'd found a kid, described him, described the bundle. As she was talking, something happened. Her words cut off mid-sentence with a choking sound. The line went dead. The podcasters laughed, nervously, like it was a creepy detail. I sat in my motel room, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. Jocelyn's car was found later in a thrift store parking lot a few towns over, intact, keys inside. There was a bus station a few blocks away. Most people assumed Jocelyn dropped the kid off and then ran away from her life. Debt, ex-boyfriends, stress, clean story. Her sister didn't believe it. She insisted Jocelyn had been in danger on that call. She said Jocelyn's last sound wasn't a bad signal. It was a strangled cry. The podcasters called it unconfirmed. They moved on. I didn't. I started calling bus stations along the likely route. I told myself I wanted security footage, a sighting, anything. Most places ignored me or brushed me off. Then, weeks later, I got an email from a board desk worker who sounded like he just wanted someone to listen to the weird thing he'd found so it wouldn't sit in his brain alone. He said there had been a report of bathroom vandalism at their station. Somebody had scribbled something on the wall. They'd snapped a photo before scrubbing off. The email had the photo attached. It was blurry graffiti on a stained bathroom wall, written in thick marker like someone was shaking while they wrote it. 2 lines. Be wary of little children. Singing by the roadside. That was all. No signature. No number. But there was something else in the corner of the photo that made my stomach drop. A small square of yellow paper stuck to the tile above the graffiti, curling at the edges like it had been there a while. Someone had tried to peel it off and failed. In black marker, 4 words. Don't get creative. I sat there staring at my laptop until my vision blurred. Because my father's post, it wasn't just a post-it anymore. It wasn't just his handwriting in a bunker. It was a warning that had traveled. It meant Owen had been there. It meant Owen, whatever he was now, was leaving procedures behind like breadcrumbs. Like he wanted people to know there were rules, even if they didn't know why. And the worst part, the most terrifying part, Rule 3. Do not speak into drains, pipes, vents, or the well access. Water has ears down here. I hadn't heard Owen in weeks, months. But once you know what listening feels like, you can't stop feeling it. I started noticing plumbing everywhere. In motel walls, in apartment ceilings, in the way sinks gurgle when you drain them at night, in the way toilets breathe after you flush. Sometimes at 3 a.m., I'd sit on my motel bed and hear the pipes tick and settle, and I'd swear there was a cadence under it. A smooth, low murmur just below hearing, like someone talking with their mouth pressed to the other side of metal. I stopped using the bathroom without the fan on because silence made it worse. I moved again, then again. Every time I'd settle somewhere, I'd find myself staring at the sink like it was a mouth. People told me to move on. Therapists nodded and wrote notes. Police shrugged. Everyone wanted a neat story. I don't get neat, because if Owen is out there, and I know he is, then whatever listened through our pipes is out there too. It's not trapped in a bunker anymore. It has roads. It has bus stations. It has bathrooms. It has city plumbing and storm drains and water mains and underground reservoirs that touch places you've never thought about. And when you think about what Owen carried up in that bundle, what screamed like metal being twisted, what made him dive back down into the darkness without hesitation, you start to realize my father wasn't the only one building something. Sometimes I imagine Owen standing somewhere beside a highway at midnight, fog curling around his bare feet, holding a bundle of rags, singing that lullaby in that wrong language. And I imagine you slowing down because you're a decent person, because you think you're saving a kid, and Owen looking up at you with that calm, knowing smile. And the pipes in your car. Yes, your car has them too, ticking softly as if they're listening.